We're on. Hello! No, that was me messing about. I knew we were on because it's just me, myself, and I pressing all the different buttons here. Let's see if that works. Nope, my messaging doesn't seem to be coming up. That's really frustrating. Is anybody watching other than... Yes, they are. If they weren't, I would have shut down and started again. Oh, well, you can message me still through this, but it won't come up on my screen. It'll come up on my phone. Let me just make an adjustment so I can see it on there. Right, hello. So, second stream of the day. Maybe I'll do a third later. We'll see how we go. So, I've got some more chapters to basically try and sign off. I need to do at least 2 now to be back on track for the target that I'd set myself. But I've actually got 3 printed off here because I've got half a mind that I might try and finish this tomorrow a day early. We shall see. Anyway, yes, so I'm just going to crack on. Oh, hang on. Hey Siri, living room lamp. That's better. So yeah, I'm literally just going to carry on reading and editing. I've already read through these once today, so I don't think there's going to be much needs changing in these. But who knows? Right, let me minimise that, put you onto that view, and then cracken the on. Okay, chapter 26, Love and Hate. Saywood ran straight to her room in the east wing and flung herself onto the bed. Molly tried to follow, but Saywood told her in no uncertain terms that she needed some time on her own. Isabel joined Sir Teddy and Molly about half an hour later in the first floor drawing room and had the unfortunate task of updating Sir Teddy on exactly what had happened. His eyes were closed as she told him of Rebecca's terrible fate, and he and Molly held hands for several minutes afterwards. "There's nothing you can do?" asked Sir Teddy. Isabel shook her head. "She's gone. The 2 people we left watching the mural have vanished. We've been unable to get hold of them. It's rather troubling." Molly started to ask a question, then stopped in embarrassment. "What would you like to ask?" asked Isabel gently. "I don't want to ask a stupid question," said Molly. Isabel looked at her. "There are no stupid questions here, Molly," she replied gently. "Would she have suffered?" Molly asked eventually. "When the picture was washed away, no, she would have had no idea that anything was happening. But you know what probably happened to her before she entered the picture, Molly." Molly's eyes clouded over. "Do you think?" Isabel gave a small, sad smile. "He's a sadist. He did this purely to hurt Saywood." Sir Teddy shook his head. "I assume we cannot proceed without her." Isabel shook her head. "She's one of 2 people that has the strength to take him on. With both we may succeed. Without her we don't stand a chance." What are you going to do?" asked Sir Teddy. "Tomorrow I must return to Scotland and put everything in place. We know which of his properties he is in. Thank you for turning over all of Nathan Walsh's information. It sped things up." "Nathan was very thorough," said Sir Teddy. "Seems to have vanished off the face of the earth since his attempt to free Saywood, though." Isabel went slightly red. "We contacted him. Rebecca had his number." Molly winced at the mention of her name. "He's helping us with the operation up there. He has some very useful contacts." Sir Teddy nodded. "I am pleased." "I need your opinion on something," said Isabel, looking across to Sir Teddy. "Is Saywood strong enough to deal with what has happened today?" Sir Teddy shook his head. "I honestly don't know." "She is," Molly piped up. "Once she gets past it, this will make her more eager to get her own back." Isabel shook her head. "I cannot have her bent on revenge. I need to know that she's going to be predictable, that she will do the things we ask her to. This must not be a crusade for vengeance." Sir Teddy shrugged. "I suppose only time will tell." Isabel stood. "Time we don't have. Excuse me, I have some calls to make. Then I will need a private word with you, Sir Teddy." He looked pointedly at Molly. She looked pointedly at Molly, who happened to be staring out of a window at the time and missed it completely. Isabel left the room, and Sir Teddy wheeled his chair over to the window to join Molly. "I don't know how to help Saywood," Molly said helplessly. "She doesn't want me near her." "Give her time," said Sir Teddy. "You know, one of the many things that impresses me about you is your capacity for acceptance. The time we come from would have condemned Saywood for her relationship with Rebecca, yet you accept it." Molly turned to him. I always thought what people do don't matter if it don't hurt anyone else, harm anyone else." "Absolutely." God, that printing quality's terrible. I do need a new toner. Hang on, I might have to... We're on the next page, aren't we? "Absolutely," said Sir Teddy. "But that's a very 21st century point of view." Molly sat down on one of the chairs. "One of the women that my mum worked with, Nellie, was in love with another woman." "My mum used to call her Filthy Nellie and told me if she even tried to talk to me I should run away." Sir Teddy smiled. "Nellie Trott. You remember her?" "I do." Last year, well, you know what I mean. I walked past a woman crying by herself near the beach. I asked her if she was okay before I realised it was Nellie. It seemed rude to walk away once I realised, so I listened to her talk. She was bullied and treated badly just because there were rumours about her. She said they weren't true, but nobody believed it. She would be spat at the street sometimes and shouted at and called names. Someone even threw rotten fruit at her once. She talked and I listened. I looked over at Sir Teddy. She was so sad, Eddie. I was worried that she was going to hurt herself, so I offered to walk her home. She said she would come with me to the end of the beach road, but after that we should walk apart because she didn't want me tainted by her. So we got to the end of the road and she thanked me and gave me some money to buy a cake. I got home and instead of spending the money, I gave it to my mum to help with the housekeeping. She was suspicious and asked how I'd come by it, so I told her I talked to a lady crying on the beach. Somehow she knew it was Nellie Trott and she screamed at me, made me promise never to talk to filthy Nellie again, or people would assume I was like her. Did you talk to her again? Yeah, said Molly with a smile. She helped me get the job at the Grand. She was a cleaner there. I once asked Mr. Downs why he employed her, what were the rumours. He told me that she was his hardest worker and didn't see what business was of his, what she did behind closed doors as long as she worked hard. Sir Teddy nodded. Mr. Downs, married to Mrs. Downs, was having a secret relationship with one of the hotel's younger waiters. That might be why he was so liberal in his views. Perhaps the fact Mrs. Trott was such a good employee was also part of the reason. Molly looked nonplussed. Oh, was all she could say. I used to be on the same team as Nellie in the Grand. We used to work together quite a lot and I got to know her. She lost her husband years ago before she moved to Folkestone. She used to tell everyone he had died, but really, I think that needs an extra word in there. Really, he'd run off with another woman. She got quite comfortable with me and even admitted she didn't like men anymore. She didn't like men anymore. She just wanted to be alone. She was nice, just unhappy. I wonder what happened to her. Sir Teddy shook his head. Nothing good, unfortunately. Molly looked up. Oh, no. A few weeks after you disappeared, one of the other girls at the Grand told the police that she thought Nellie might have had something to do with what happened to you. Of course, that young lady was completely wrong, but everyone talked about it and refused to work with her at the hotel. And in the end, they let her go. So Teddy paused and thought for a moment. Nellie had to move away from Folkestone soon after. Nobody would employ her. Molly shook her head. People are so cruel. I've never felt threatened by her, just so I don't feel threatened by Sayward. It's because you can always see the best in people, said Teddy. You are naturally kind-hearted and generous. That is why I adored you so much when I was young and why I wanted to find you when I realised there's a chance that you, like me, may have survived what Sosie did to you. But don't you think you're kind-hearted too? Molly asked curiously. Isn't that why you wanted to help me? It is not the only reason, I'm afraid. Part of my wanting to find Sosie was so that I could help you, and the other part was driven purely by the hope for an opportunity for some kind of revenge for what he did to me. You hate him? Sir Teddy nodded. I do. Not as passionately as I once did. I calmed down as I got older. But I still cannot forgive him for the terrible things he did to me, and you, and Sayward, and now Rebecca. So I think it is true to say that I'm driven by hate as much as love, which is not a good thing, Molly. I'm not proud of some of my inner thoughts, especially concerning Max Sosie. I think Sayward is driven by hate, said Molly sadly. On the car on the way back, she said she wanted to kill him. Sir Teddy nodded. I'm not sure that's what the Institute plans to do, he said, but they will use her hate for their own ends. Poor Sayward will never have the opportunity to calm down and rationalise her grief as I did. Molly shook her head, more tears forming. We'll have to stop her using her then. Sir Teddy took her hand gently and shook his head. We must not. Isabel believes they will only succeed with her help, and in the grand scheme of things, removing Sosie also means preventing a lot of potential harm that he could do to others in the future. But what about Sayward? She's no killer. What will it do to her? Sir Teddy shook his head. It will damage her. But we will be there for her, Molly. We can mitigate that harm. Molly was openly crying now. It don't feel right. No, but it's a necessary evil. Isabel had stepped back into the room, her mobile phone in hand. What is a necessary evil? Sir Teddy stared back at her. Killing Sosie. Isabel looked uncomfortable and nodded. May I have that private word with you now, Sir Teddy? This is not a good moment. Sorry, I have a pressing engagement, sir. I need to get back up to Scotland to coordinate things. Molly sniffed. I'll go and try and talk to Sayward again, she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand as she left the room. Isabel sat down. What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room, she said. Can Sayward know? No. I cannot prevent her from seeing what's in my mind, he replied. No, you can't, said Isabel. But I can. She took his hand, and for a few moments Ted experienced what felt like fingers at the back of his mind. He winced. It was not an entirely comfortable sensation. Isabel glared at him, her face neutral. You're ready now, she said with a whisper. Listen. It needs an extra word. It just needs the word listen on the end. Listen. There we go. Molly climbed the stairs of the east wing and walked up to the door of the room she'd been sharing with Saywood. She knocked timidly and waited for a response. "Who is it?" came Saywood's voice through the door. "Molly." There was a pause. "What do you want?" "I've come to check on you. Can I come in?" There was a pause. "If you want." Molly opened the door and walked in. Saywood was lying on a single bed with her eyes closed. The curtains were drawn so it was dark in the room. Molly left the door open, left the room so the light in the corridor spilled in. I've got a space in there that doesn't need to be there. Saywood turned that she was facing away from her. Molly walked up to the bed and sat down on the end. Not at the end, on the end. "I don't know what to say to you, Saywood. I only knew Rebecca for a couple of days. She was so nice to me. I don't want to talk about it," said Saywood. "I know," said Molly, "but I just want you to know you're not alone in this." She rested a hand on Saywood's shoulder and could feel her flinch at the physical contact. "If you touch me, I can see into your head," said Saywood. "Not on purpose, but I'm too distracted to prevent it right now." "There's nothing in my head I don't want you to see," said Molly. She sat down next to Saywood and tried to take her hand, but Saywood snatched it away. Molly put her hand back in her lap and continued. "I don't know how to help you, but it's what I want most in the world." She was expecting Saywood to tell her to get off the bed and go away, and was surprised when her hand sought hers, grasping it. There was a moment of silence between them, then Saywood broke down and started sobbing. Molly squeezed her hand and said nothing for a few moments. "She didn't deserve to die like that," cried Saywood. "Of course she didn't. We'd only just found each other again, Molly." Molly said nothing, just kept holding her hand. "All I can think of is I unwittingly forced her into that relationship. That every time we were intimate, I was making her do it against her will." "There's a word for that." "Nah," Molly whispered. "None of it was her choice." "What does that make me?" sobbed Saywood. Molly's mind flashed back to her time imprisoned by Sosie, and she could feel Saywood tense up. She tried to think of something else, but her mind kept returning to the occasions when Sosie had done the same to her. She started to cry softly. Saywood turned and glanced up into Molly's reddening face. She brushed some tears from her cheek. "Sorry, Molly. I didn't mean to make you relive that. Molly wept, her eyes closed. Saywood sat up and hugged her tightly. "I'm so sorry." Molly eventually came to her senses and opened her eyes. "It wasn't the same, though, was it?" she sniffed. "Your intention was never to hurt. You believed that she wanted to be there. She believed she wanted to be there. And that's the difference. Sosie wanted to hurt me. That's how he got his pleasure. Don't you dare compare yourself with what you did to what he did. You're nothing like him." Saywood squeezed Molly, and images of the revenge she wanted to inflict on him entered her head. Molly flinched. "I can see what you're thinking. What you want to do to him." Saywood shook her head. "That's where we're different," she said. "You just want to walk away. I want to stop him." She paused. "I'm not judging you, Molly. I've been told that I can stop him, so I must do it." "I see that," said Molly. "But remember, you're not doing this on your own. I'm worried that you're going to go off and try and deal with him by yourself, and if you do that, I'll lose one of the only friends I got now." She wept again softly. "Don't do anything crazy, Say. I couldn't stand it." "Bex used to call me Say," said Saywood softly. "I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. You're right. I'm so full of hate at the moment I could do anything." "Promise me you won't." "I can't." Molly pulled herself from the embrace and stood up. "You have to promise me, Saywood. I've literally lost everyone I ever met apart from Edward, and he's an old man now. I understand that you feel the need to get your own back. I do. But I need you." Saywood sat up, trying to push Molly's thoughts from her head, but failing. Hang on, I need to scroll to the next page. "You're scared of losing me. You think I'll get killed. You'd rather walk away now, not to get too close if I'm going to die like everyone else. I don't like it when you do that. But yeah, I know you need to do this, but for God's sake, do it with Isabel." I'm going to say Isabel's way. "Do it Isabel's way." Saywood stared at her with a steely expression. "They want to keep him alive for research. That's so dangerous. I won't be told what to do, Molly. Not by them." Her face hardened. "And not by you." Molly closed her eyes. "I ain't telling you. I'm asking you. It's the same thing. Do you know what Isabel did the day I met her, Molly? She let an innocent girl suffering from depression die. She could have stopped her. Why should I ally myself with that? For me! So I don't lose you. That isn't enough." Molly glared at her through bloodshot eyes. "I'm sorry then. I'll get my stuff and move it in the main part of the house." Saywood said nothing. Molly ran down the stairs through the east wing kitchen, the connecting door into the main part of the house. She was sobbing, and Marion called after her. "Molly, love, are you okay?" Molly ran into the hall, past Mr. Harris, and up the stairs to the drawing room on the first floor. She flung herself into a chair and cried. A few moments later, Teddy entered the room. "What's wrong, Molly?" Molly shook her head. "She's going to do something crazy. She don't trust the Institute. She's not going to work with them. She's going to try and deal with Sosie on her own." That's a problem, said Isabel. Molly gasped. She'd not seen her walk in. Don't tell her I said anything, said Molly. I'm just worried if she goes off her own, she'll get herself killed. Isabel shook her head. If she does go off her own, she will get herself killed. They were interrupted this moment by Mr. Harris, who entered them with tea tray, which he set down on the table, then retreated again. Isabel poured a cup of tea, added plenty of sugar, and took it over to Molly. I know you think we want to use her. If I'm honest, it's partly true. We don't have a hope in hell if she isn't with us. Just as she doesn't if we aren't with her. The only way we can deal with Max Sosi is together. Molly took a sip of the tea. It's too sweet, she said. Just drink it, said Isabel. It will help. What did she say? Asked Teddy. She said she's going to deal with Sosi. When I tried to make a promise to do it safely, she indicated Isabel, she told me she won't be told what to do. Isabel rolled her eyes. She said that. Okay, I need to make a phone call. Okay, I need to make a phone call. Will you try and stop her? Asked Teddy. The thing that scares me is that I don't know that we could stop her, even if we wanted to, said Isabel. I think I've made a terrible mistake, she said to herself before looking back to Sir Teddy and Molly. I need to talk to Meredith Lawson. Try not to let her go anywhere. Let me go where? Snapped Saywood. There was a pause. I will talk to you all later. First I need to talk to Molly. Nobody moved. Alone! She shouted. I don't think that's a good idea, said Isabel. I'm not asking, said Saywood through gritted teeth, her bloodshot eyes wide. Sir Teddy took Isabel's hand. I think we should give them a moment. He let go and wheeled himself over to the door. Miss Myerscough, please. Reluctantly, Isabel joined him. They closed the door behind them. Saywood walked over to Molly. I want you to listen to me. Do you have something I want to hear? Saywood's face softened. Yes, I think I do. Molly dried her eyes. What? Saywood looked down. I want to tell you that you're right, that I can't do this on my own. Isabel makes my blood run cold because of what she did to Cavi. She sniffed and closed her eyes to hide the tears. I'm sorry, Molly. She took a step closer. I can't afford to lose your friendship. I can't afford to lose your friendship either. Outside, Isabel was about to press the button and make a call when her expression changed. She looked relieved and lowered the hand containing her phone. What's happened? Asked Sir Teddy. She's talked her around, said Isabel with a faint smile. Saywood's going to work with us. That's good, isn't it? Isabel smiled broadly. It means that I might live to see next week. She looked down at Sir Teddy. She's all over the place, though. She's almost too unpredictable to be reliable. I can't afford for her to change her mind again. The door opened and Saywood stepped through. I'm sorry, Isabel, she said. You know that I'm struggling not to hold you responsible for what happened to Cavi. It has tainted my perception of the whole institute. Also, put me on stage the other day at your little gathering did not help. I genuinely didn't know they were going to do that, stated Isabel. Saywood nodded as Molly walked out the door and stood next to her. This isn't a promise. This isn't a promise I'm making to you or the institute, Isabel. It's a promise I'm making to Molly. I promise her that I'll work with you and do what has to be done regarding with dealing with Max Sosi. I will not go it alone. I will follow you until the situation is resolved. One way or the other. One way or the other? Inquired Sir Teddy. Saywood lowered her voice. Either we die or he does. Isabel shook her head. You know that's not the plan, Saywood. You need to promise Molly that you will do this our way. You don't trust me, snapped Saywood. I don't think you have the self-control to stop your heart from ruling your head, no. Saywood walked up to her, deliberately invading her personal space. You need me to do this, and I cannot do it on my own, however much my hatred for Sosi wants me to try. I promise I will not let you down. Isabel looked uncomfortable. That's not what I asked. But is it enough? Isabel eyed her coldly, then made a decision. I suppose it will have to be. I understand the anger in you, Saywood, the rage, but you need to put it in a box for now. Can you help me with that? Isabel smiled and some of the tension melted from the room. I probably can, if you want me to. I do. Molly walked up to Saywood, embraced her. Isabel joined them and squeezed Molly's shoulder. Thank you, Molly. What happens now? Asked Sir Teddy. I will show Saywood some anger management techniques, said Isabel. Then I have to head to Scotland. The longer we think about doing this without going ahead, the greater the possibility that Sosi will find out and try to stop us, or move to another location. We've almost finalised the plans for the operation. We were just waiting on confirmation what is happening with Saywood here. Now her involvement is confirmed. Someone will come and brief you tomorrow. We need to move quickly. He is no doubt expecting something, and once we set things in motion, they cannot safely be stopped. She paused. Are you sure you're ready, Saywood, to do this our way? Saywood nodded. For Rebecca, for Molly. Oh no, sorry, wrong voice. Saywood nodded. For Rebecca, for Molly, for Sir Teddy. She lowered her gaze. For everyone that bastard has ever hurt. She paused and looked into Isabel's eyes. Yes, Isabel, I'm ready. It's quite wordy and charactery, but I suppose we need that at this point because it's about to go the opposite direction. So, right, let's export. Make it into a Word file. drag it into Grammarly. Is my Grammarly window still open? Yes, it is. Let me just minimise it a bit. Right, 26. What score was it giving me at the start? 92! Wow. Right, sorry, just had a message that I needed to respond to. So chapter 26, Love or Hate. 92 is a very good opening score. Right then, let's have a look. So that's deliberately, that's the way she speaks. Okay, we'll accept that. For everyone. Closing score, 92. I'll have that. Right, download. Okay, then I just need to open that. Copy it, paste it into a neutral document that has no formatting. And paste it back into the final document. Ah, damn it. Right, so that's chapter 26. Yoo-hoo! So let me close that, drag the relevant chapter into the relevant folder. There we go. Chapter 27, Ready or Not. Oh, right. This is the longest chapter so far in the book, this one, I think. Nothing compared to, I mean, this is 14 of these pages. Empress of the Trees has one 25 or 26 page chapter. But anyway, chapter 27, Ready or Not. They've started. Sayward sat on a chair in the first floor drawing room, her eyes closed. Molly was next to her on a high-backed armchair. "What makes you say that?" asked Molly. "They've gone all silent," stated Sayward. "I could see that there were people there, but they've shut their minds off to me." The large house was empty apart from the two of them. The staff had been given the day off, and the grounds of the Ainsley estate given over to the Institute. They'd asked Sayward to take the part of the protagonist, and the rest were going to try and hunt her down. "How will they find you?" "They can still read me. I'm not very good at closing my mind off." "But won't Sosie have his mind close off when everything happens?" Molly shuddered as she thought about him. Sayward closed her eyes and considered. "I guess so. At his house I don't even remember reading him at all, apart from when he deliberately pushed images into my head." "What have they asked you to do?" asked Molly, nodding ahead towards the front of the house where the Institute members were gathering. "To wait here, see what they throw at me, then do everything in my power to stop them." Molly smiled and gave Sayward a cheeky look. "And do you think he will wait, in one place, if he works out you're all there?" Sayward looked thoughtfully at her, and then nodded slowly. "That's a very good point. What are you thinking?" "Well, if he realises you're coming, he's going to be one step ahead. What's the point of a practice run if you don't, do the same?" Sayward's smile widened. "You're saying that I shouldn't wait here?" Molly grinned. "What do you reckon?" Sayward jumped out of her seat and grabbed Molly by the hands, pulling her up right out of the chair. "You're right," she said with a sly smile. "He's not going to play by any rules, so why should I? Isabel suggested they improvise too, against Geraldine's instructions. I just don't like doing what Isabel tells me." "But you don't mind it from me?" asked Molly. "Hell no," replied Sayward with a wicked grin. "I like you. Come on." They snuck out of the hall and through the door into the gallery. Sayward ran to the forward-facing window and looked out across the fields that made up the estate. There were plenty of outbuildings beyond the lawn, and the grounds before them were modestly contoured rather than flat. As for people, Sayward could see none. "I need a moment to block my mind off," said Sayward. "Keep an eye out. Let me know if you see anyone." Molly nodded and ran to the window. One of the windows. I'm just going to, because again I've established there's lots of windows here, so I'm just going to, top of page 2. And put a forward-facing window. Sayward closed her eyes. The wall leapt up around the image of the grassy field. Now that she was practising regularly again, it was completed in seconds. Sayward considered stopping there with one layer, but she knew that to make it stable and secure, she ought to build a second. In the few days she'd been given to build her strength since being discharged from the hospital, she had managed to complete the second layer on several occasions. The large grey blocks went up quickly, and soon she had a dual layer of mental defences. She gave a satisfied smile. She'd never completed a second row of bricks that quickly. Should she try for a third? She remembered what Isabel had said. No two adjacent layers could be made out of the same material. She decided to use red bricks for the third layer, the same as the first, so it was harder this time, trying to build this new wall whilst making the first two, which she did not rush. She started building it brick by brick, and as that became easier, she moved to doing whole rows at a time. It came very close to crumbling about halfway through, so she stopped, mentally shored up the wall, then continued slowly, one brick at a time. She was astonished because a matter of minutes later it was completed. She stood looking at the triple-layered mental barrier. It was the first one she'd ever attempted or completed. Sayward opened her eyes. Molly was looking out the window. "I'm done," said Sayward. Molly ran over to her. "What next?" she asked breathlessly. "Now I'm going to take this exceedingly seriously. I don't know how many of them there are, but I'm going to prove a point. Which is, don't underestimate Sosie." She paused before giving a mirthless grin. "Or me, for that matter." Sayward held out her hand. "Take this." "Why?" "I want to test my defences. Physical contact makes mental contact stronger. I'm going to think about something. I want to check that you can't see it." Molly took Sayward's hand. "Now what?" Sayward closed her eyes. She thought of a picture of Rebecca in her favourite coat, laughing at something she had said. Feelings of loss rushed through her, and she pushed back tears. She was briefly caught in the moment, then remembered why she'd called out the image. She snapped her eyes open and looked across to Molly. "Anything?" she asked. Molly shook her head. "Sorry, I can see Bex." Sayward frowned. "Oh well, maybe the barriers don't work with physical contact. I'll ask Geraldine later." Her sombre expression faded and she smiled. "Assuming she's still talking to me after today. Right, let's do this." "What's your plan?" asked Molly. "Plan?" asked Sayward. "I don't have a plan, love. I'm going to wing it." She looked around the outbuildings that were some distance from the house, and her eyes were drawn to an old barn that was a couple of 100 metres to the right of the window of the winding driveway. "We will start outside in the barn." Molly and Saywood were kneeling on the floor. The outbuilding was old, and some of the planks that made up the walls had narrow gaps between them which they peered through. 2 people from the Institute had gone past already, in the direction of the house. "It's not going to take long for them to work out you're not here," said Molly. "That's fine," said Saywood. Molly frowned, posing a question with her expression. Saywood took a breath and looked away from the hole in the wall. I'll do something with the next person that comes past. I can either control their actions or put an image in their head if there's more than one." "There's someone out there now," hissed Molly. Saywood put her face to the wall again and stared through on the gaps. "So there is. 3 of them. How'd you put an image in people's minds?" Saywood shook her head. "It's hard to describe. I sort of see things as though I'm them. Isabel gave me some basic lessons, taught me some other skills, when she showed me how to box up my anger." "How can you do that when you've built your wall?" "My mental defences are one way at the moment," said Saywood. "Nobody can see my thoughts or control my actions when it is only 3 layers deep, but I can still send images and instructions." "But what if they've also built their walls?" Saywood looked across to Molly. "I will smash them down. I'm more powerful than most of them, Molly. I'm not skilled, but I am strong. Now hush, I need to concentrate." She looked around for inspiration for an image to push into the minds of the people outside, but all she could see in the barn was hay and a grey tractor. Her eyes focused on the old machine, and the humour left her face. Yes, that would do. She started to concentrate. The 3 Institute members that were standing outside the barn did not see or hear the tractor until it was practically upon them. They stood looking towards the house when suddenly the large grey machine was bearing down on them. One pulled the other out of the way, but the third did not get out of the way in time. It hit him and he fell to one side, the front wheel of the tractor running over his left leg. He lay on the ground screaming as the larger rear wheel rolled over him. The others looked up with fear and bewilderment. There was no sign of the vehicle. The man on the ground was yelling in agony. Saywood peered through the wall, her eyes wide. She had intended for the tractor to drive past, but the man had been right in the way. She knew that he was, in reality, unharmed, and felt a brief pang of guilt for the pain and fear that he was going through, then quickly brushed it aside. So she would think nothing of inflicting real damage on these people. "What's happening?" asked Molly. "Quiet," instructed Saywood. She narrowed her eyes at the 3 men, showing everyone the crushed, unnatural angle of the fallen man's leg. His blue jeans were starting to go red with blood. "Jesus," one was saying. "Where did that come from?" "I'll get help," said the other. He closed his eyes. Saywood knew that she did not want her location to be revealed, so she impulsively sent out the first image she could think of to distract them, a fantasy in which she was hurting Sosie. Both men clutched their heads, screaming at her to stop, and fell to the ground. Saywood turned to Molly with a satisfied look, which left her face as soon as she saw her friend. Molly was yelping, and her hands were covering her mouth in an attempt to hold in vomit. She had failed, and it was trickling through her fingertips. "Oh, my God!" Molly looked up at Saywood, an angry and accusative look in her eyes. Saywood's eyes widened. She realised what she'd done. The protective wall exploded inside her mind. "That wasn't for you," Saywood said frantically. "I'm so sorry, Molly." "Is that what you want to do to him?" shouted Molly. Saywood held her gaze. "That's terrible." "So is what he did to you, to Rebecca, to Sir Teddy." Saywood had accidentally witnessed one of Sir Teddy's nightmares the night before last, one in which he had received the moment when Max Sosie had crippled him. As that unpleasant memory filled Saywood's head, she accidentally transmitted to everyone, including Molly, who put her hands to her head when she saw what Sosie had done to young Edward's legs. Molly shrieked. Helplessly, Saywood sent everyone a capital A for some reason. There we go. A command to sleep. The 2 outside that remained standing dropped immediately to the floor, and Molly, who was already on her knees, fell forward into the straw. Saywood caught her and laid her down gently. "I'm sorry," she said softly, tears in her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you as well." She kissed Molly's forehead and touched her cheek gently. "It seems all I can do is hurt." She let go of her friend, looked down at her for a moment, and then stood up, brushing the straw from her jeans. She walked outside and one by one dragged the 3 sleeping men into the barn. They were heavy and it was hard work, and by the time she was pulling the 3rd man inside, her arms hooked between his arms and body. She was sweating. She let him carelessly down next to the others, then rushed back outside. She kept low, using the bushes and tall grass as cover, carefully looking around her as well as keeping her mind open in the hope of sensing someone. As soon as she saw anyone, she sent them the terrible images of her revenge fantasy, sometimes changing the face of the victim to those of the people she saw. Most of them had never seen any real violence, and the sickening scene stopped them in their tracks. Several went to the ground and threw up, and at this point, Saywood commanded them to sleep. 4 more, 3 more. There was even a group of 7. Saywood hid from them, subjected them to the most unpleasant visions that she could dream up, then made them slumber. There was a cry from the house. Saywood, what the hell are you doing? Stop this at once. Someone had discovered some of her handiwork. Saywood shook her head. When they did this for real, there was no way that Sosu would be subdued by an impassioned plea to cease his activities. So neither would she. Saywood crept forward towards the house and reached a vantage point from which she could see Geraldine standing on the steps of the main entrance. A further 10 Institute members were gathered around her. Saywood, shouted Geraldine again, this exercise is over. Stop what you are doing immediately. Saywood stepped out in front of them. Who says it's over? I do, cried Geraldine. And will it stop when you are doing this for real? Shouted Saywood. Will Sosie just cease when you tell him to? This is supposed to be an exercise to build our confidence. Saywood marched towards him. No, it isn't. I was told to take this seriously, to resist you as though I was him. I am not stopping now. Well, we are, shouted Geraldine, waving her hands at Saywood. We are not, screamed Saywood at the top of her voice. I'm not a fraction as powerful as him. If you can't stop me, you won't be able to stop him. And if that happens, we're all fucked. Geraldine shook her head nervously. Don't take a step further, she commanded, her hands in front of her. Saywood could not feel emotions coming from Geraldine. Her defences saw to that, but she could see that Geraldine was red-faced, sweating, and visibly shaking slightly. She was not just scared, Saywood realised. She was terrified of her. Saywood kept walking. The people around Geraldine looked to her for instruction. Saywood imagined a man with a machine gun running from the door behind them, pushing the image into all of them. The Phantom stopped and pointed his weapon at them. The group tightened around Geraldine, fear in their eyes. Stop! Shrieked Geraldine. No! You have to stop me! Saywood screamed at the top of her voice. The group of Institute members backed into each other. The gunman sneered, raised his weapon, then fired it into them. They screamed as they felt the bullets and fell en masse to the floor. The Vision walked up to them and dispassionately started executing them one by one with a shot to the head. When he came to Geraldine, he sneered and smashed her head with the butt of his gun. Already regretting the perceived violence he just inflicted upon them, Saywood sent the group into a deep trance. They would wake naturally in several hours or earlier if someone else woke them. The only person that remained conscious was Geraldine, who was whimpering and being sick on the floor. The Institute thought this was going to be a simple exercise. They now had to stop her. If they could not, then their attempt to put an end to Sosie would undoubtedly fail. Saywood ran back to the barn. Molly was now awake in the corner, sobbing to herself. When she saw Saywood, she threw her arms across her head. Keep away from me! Saywood ran over to her and tried to hug her, but Molly shrank back. No, that was terrible, Saywood. You were torturing him and enjoying it. Saywood stood, and a cold expression crossed her face. He did the same to you. Molly screwed up her eyes, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. You mustn't be like him, Saywood. If you're as cruel as him, then you'll be as bad as him. Saywood glowered at her. So I'm supposed to forget what he's done to hundreds of people? Her eyes were wet with tears and she could feel a scream building up in her. Molly was right. What the hell was she doing? Saywood let out a pained howl on the walls of the barn and suddenly cracked as though something had exploded inside the room with them. Saywood stared uncomprehendingly at the shattered walls before realising she had caused it. Stop! Cried Molly. Saywood fell to her knees with her eyes closed. Without thinking, she gripped the prolata and let out another scream. It was amplified 1,000 times by the stone in her hand. In their homes at the end of the estate, Harris, Angela, Marion and Sir Teddy, who were having lunch at Marion's house, screwed up their eyes and put their hands to their heads. In the barn, Molly screamed with terror, expecting what was left of the barn walls to explode around her. Saywood stood in the building in the middle of a psychic storm. All around the estate, members of the Institute fell to their knees. Jagvir felt his mental defences shatter, as did those of everyone around him. Not only were they now hearing Saywood scream, but they were also experiencing her anger. The rush of pure rage swelled around them, and it was all many of them could do not to push it away. Some did not manage. A group of 5 men failed to adequately close their minds in time, and as their emotions flooded through them, they started attacking each other with fists or anything they could get their hands on. All around the grounds of the Ainsley estate, hundreds of people were either writhing on the floor in pain or fighting, in the midst of it, Saywood screamed and screamed. Geraldine opened her eyes and was immediately impacted upon by the waves of emotions smashing their way out of the barn. Violent images tore through her mind, images of Sosie undergoing every physical indignity it was possible to imagine. She shrieked in pain, closed her eyes, and tried to ignore Saywood's onslaught. Somewhere in all the madness, she found a moment of calm and mentally cocooned herself within it. It gave her the few seconds that she needed, and she used that time to rebuild the wall in her mind. 1 layer, then 2, then 3. It did not stop the psychic barrage that was pushing at her very consciousness, but it did help to mitigate it. Geraldine looked around her. There were members of the Institute littered everywhere, either unconscious or screaming in pain with their hands over their ears. She glanced around and could see a group of 10 people having a brawl with Jagvir in the middle, trying to stop it. He took a punch to the head, fell and dragged himself away. There was nothing more he could do. The feelings of hatred gradually transformed into sensations of loss. The people that had been fighting stopped and were overcome with emotion now, many of them overcome with emotion, many of them now starting to cry. Geraldine pushed away over to Jagvir, who was nursing a bruised jaw. "Are you all right?" she asked frantically. Jagvir winced, but he gripped her hand, and she helped him to his feet. "I'm okay," he said, "but that poor girl is having a breakdown. We have to help her." Geraldine glared at him. "I've just checked with Meredith. There are almost 100 of us on this dry run. She's managed to incapacitate everyone. We don't need to help her. We need to stop her." "We'll just have to agree to disagree for the moment," said Jagvir. He looked around. Everyone he could see was showing signs of grief. He could feel the losses in his life reaching out from the recesses of his memory, but he quickly densified the wall around his mind, adding several layers. He could see from the look of concentration on Geraldine's face that she was doing the same. "Do you have a plan?" she asked. "We need to get as many people as we can," said Geraldine, "one at a time. Help them put up their barriers. Then we need to find Saywood and calm her down." "How are we going to find her if we've all got our barriers up?" he snapped. "One thing at a time," said Geraldine. Someone will have to drop their defences, or if we can find someone with Isabel's ability to locate, we will do that. I have something of Saywood's in my pack." I went over to the nearest pair of incapacitated Institute members and helped to calm them down, encouraging them to rebuild their walls. Once this was done, all 4 people that now had control of their senses found more of them mobilised and did the same. Geraldine felt a drop of water on her face and looked up into the sky. It had been clear before, the sun had been out, but now severe storm clouds were gathering overhead. The wind was starting to blow as well. She finished helping the person she was with and hurried over to Jagvir. "It's not just a psychic storm she's brewing, it's a real one as well," she said with awe. "She can't be this powerful." "Perhaps she's not in control of what she's doing," stated Jagvir as he helped another man up. "Perhaps she doesn't even understand." Geraldine shook her head. "They know. Actually, I think I've said, 'Oh, she's strong, but we didn't know she was that strong,' so many times I might just lose that line." Yeah, let's lose that line. Because I've done something similar to it on several occasions. Right. In the barn, Saywood was lying on the floor in the fetal position, screaming, her eyes closed tight. Molly was against the broken wall and could feel the emotion shooting out from Saywood. One side of her desperately wanted to run away, to get out of the door and leave, but she knew that she had to help her friend. She had no idea when the wind was coming from, but it was now in the barn itself, kicking up straw and dust. Molly focused on Saywood and saw that she was at the centre of a small but powerful cyclone. There was a sudden flash, and she realised that the barn had been struck by lightning right above where Saywood was lying. Moments later, she could smell ozone in the air. Molly tried to stand up, but the wind was incredibly strong and she felt her balance go almost immediately. She returned to the ground and crawled slowly. She returned to her hands and knees. And crawled towards Saywood on her hands and knees. Yeah, let's just... The sound around her changed. Yeah. She was starting to hear a fierce wind coming from outside. For the last few minutes she'd heard the gentle noise of rain on the tiles above her, but this had become noticeably more fierce as well. It sounded like a torrential downpour hammering on the outside of the building, and moments later she could see water starting to pour through what was left of the roof. Molly looked back down at her hands and continued to slowly crawl across to her screaming friend on the floor. The sensation of loss she was experiencing were horrible, and Molly had to fight her instinct to flee. She concentrated on putting one hand in front of the other. She kept her eyes closed so that the muck and the dirt that was flying around did not clog them up, opened them occasionally so that she knew she was still going in the right direction. A couple of minutes later her hand struck Saywood. Molly opened her eyes and could see that she was lying on the floor and screeching. The brief moment where her hand had made contact had been horrible. The feelings that were already making her feel physically sick were amplified to a point where they were almost unbearable. The thought of touching her again was terrifying, but Molly knew that she had no choice. She opened her eyes briefly to orient herself and gently shook Saywood's shoulder, almost gagging at the feelings that exploded into her mind as she did so. "Saywood!" she screamed. "Saywood, stop this!" She opened her eyes and could see that her words had not even registered. She tried shaking Saywood again, even slapping her, but it made no difference, and each time she made physical contact the feelings almost overwhelmed her. The barn doors opened and Geraldine, Jagvir and at least 15 other people entered the space. They had not needed anybody with locator skills. From outside you could see that the epicentre of everything was the barn. They were all soaked with water running down their faces and dripping from their hair. "Get away from her!" Geraldine yelled to Molly. "She's incredibly dangerous at the moment." "I'm trying to help her," Molly yelled back. "You don't know how," Geraldine shouted at her. "She'll end up hurting you." For a moment Saywood's screaming stopped. There was a look of relief on the face of everyone in the room until her mouth opened again. This time the scream was even louder, and one by one the members of the Institute put their hands on their heads as the mental cacophony broke through their barriers. Jagvir shook his head. "What do we do now?" he shouted. "I'm going to have to go well beyond my brief," Geraldine yelled back at him, swinging her backpack onto the floor. She fell to her hands and knees as the wind almost blew her over, and she opened the bag and pulled out a sheathed hunting knife. "What are you going to do?" asked Jagvir in shock. "I'm going to try and use pain to snap her out of this," screamed Geraldine back, pulling the cover from the blade and dropping it onto the floor. "Don't hurt her." "I have to hurt her," shouted Geraldine. "Hopefully I won't have to kill her." Jagvir nodded uncertainly and jumped as another bolt of lightning struck the roof of the barn, making everything glow for a brief second. He looked around. There were only 4 of them left on their feet now. The others had all had their defences broken and were lying on the floor. "Well, do it quickly," he gasped as he felt his defences crumble. Let's just make that into 2 sentences. He fell to the floor as a further lightning bolt struck the barn. Geraldine watched in horror, wondering how much longer she could hold out. And started crawling towards Saywood. Molly had not any luck in getting a response from Saywood, and as she examined her on the floor, she noticed there was some blood coming from her hand. She was gripping something so tight that her fingernails had dug deep into her palms. Instinctively, Molly knew that she had to get whatever it was from Saywood's grasp. She fell to the floor, grabbing her hand, trying to ride the extra emotions this had caused, like a surfer riding a wave. Because she had anticipated the onslaught, she was partially successful and managed to bob along the surface of the raw emotions before being thrown at her. She focused on Saywood's hand. There was a leather cord poking out from under her tightly clamped fingers, so Molly tried to pull on it, but to no avail. She concentrated on pulling open Saywood's little finger, prizing at it with all her strength. Molly pulled and eventually the finger opened, but as soon as she let go, it clamped back shut again. Saywood looked at the floor, found a very old rusty wooden-handled screwdriver. She grabbed it, and thought about how she could use it. She might be able to pry the fingers open with a metal end, but she'd probably end up hurting Saywood. So instead, Molly pulled open the little finger again, and as soon as she'd done so, she forced the wooden end of the screwdriver into Saywood's hand, so that when the finger inevitably clamped shut again, it was around the handle. Smiling grimly, Molly worked on the ring finger, pulling at it until it opened up. She pushed the screwdriver handle in part further into her palm. Let's just reword that slightly. To Saywood's grasp. She looked up and could see a woman crawling towards them. She had a large knife in her mouth and a determined look in her eyes. Molly crawled round so their own body was between Saywood and Geraldine, embracing Saywood from behind. There was a sudden loud bang and bits of the roof fell in around them. Molly shrieked and looked above her. The smell of ozone was overpowering and there was now water pouring directly onto them. Saywood turned her attention to Saywood's hand. She could see half of whatever it was that Saywood was grasping, but even with only 2 fingers holding it in place, it was still stuck fast. Molly started to put on Saywood's middle finger when she heard a voice shout at her, "Get off her! Let me deal with her!" Molly tensed, waiting for a physical attack on the back of her body, but none came. "I won't let you kill her! I don't want to kill her!" shrieked Geraldine, now at the very limit of what her mental barriers could protect her from. "Just use pain to distract her." Molly ignored the woman and pulled again on Saywood's middle finger. It moved, but she was not quick enough to pull the object from her grasp. She could feel Geraldine behind her, trying to pull her away from Saywood. "My barriers are almost down," pleaded Geraldine, and Molly could hear the pain in her voice. "I have to stop her." Molly pulled at the finger again, using her other hand to pull at the object. Even with Saywood's thumb and finger holding it in place, it was was hard work, but Molly pushed the handle of the screwdriver further into Saywood's grasp so the fingers could not meet, and tugged at the object using the cord attached to it. "It's too late," she heard Geraldine mutter before collapsing. With a shriek of terror, Molly pulled one last time at the cord, but the object, whatever it was, would not move. Molly shook her head, exhausted, and closed her eyes. Oh, this was a minor rewrite, not in a recent draft. The door of the barn swung open, and an enigmatic woman. The door of the barn swung open, and an enigmatic figure stepped in. A tall woman with a face obscured by a veil and mask. She stepped forwards and started walking over to where Geraldine, Molly, and Saywood were lying on the floor. Although there was a tremendous wind blowing around her and sheets of water falling from the beams that had once supported the roof, Lady Khalida Desai's clothing showed no sign of any of it. She was neat and dry, her clothes unmoving in the gale. She walked slowly over to Saywood. You can actually see that bit in the movie version, can't you? Like slow motion with all that going on, but just this calm figure walking towards her. She slowly walked over to Saywood, leaned down and plucked the prolato out of her hand. The result was immediate. The wind inside the barn cut out, and the screaming in her mind, Saywood's scream. Fell back to a manageable level, then stopped. Molly hugged Saywood tightly. She was not sure how long they were there, but eventually she heard the barn doors open. "Check them," commanded an authoritative voice. "Yes, Mrs. Lawson," responded another. Molly heard 2 pairs of footsteps heading towards them. "Are you conscious?" asked a voice. "I am," said Molly softly, sitting up and brushing sawdust and straw from her clothes and hair. "I'm not sure about Saywood and Geraldine." Meredith approached cautiously and knelt. Geraldine was coming around, and Saywood seemed to be sleeping soundly. "Are you hurt?" Meredith asked Geraldine. "I don't think so," said Geraldine groggily, and stood up, the knife in her hand. "Were you planning to use that?" snapped Lady Desai angrily. Geraldine was at a loss for words. Jagvid, also woken up, was being helped to his feet. "She was only going to try and distract her." "By stabbing her," said Lady Desai angrily. "I wasn't going to kill her." "I'm sure you're in total control," said Lady Desai sarcastically. Saywood opened her eyes, and they went wide with fear as she sat up and saw the mess and the fallen people around her. "What the bloody hell happens now?" asked Molly, throwing her arms protectively around Saywood. Meredith Lawson frowned and put her head to one side. "That," she responded mirthlessly, "is a very good question indeed." Yeah, quite a lot happens in that. There we go, another chapter. And that, again, that gets me, that's my target for today. So now I am back on track, having not done anything much yesterday. But anyway, so let's just... Let's get ready to do this through Grammarly. Okay, Grammarly, here we come. So get rid of that. General audience and tell a story. No, I think there should be a comma there, whatever that says. Who remained? Yep, that's fair enough. Yep, that's fine. Hey Siri, spell fetal.
Fetal. F-E-T-A-L.
Okay, so it might be that I'm just wrong. I just thought maybe that was a... Let me just check. British English, F-O-E. So... right, I can see what I've done. So I've got the wrong page up. So, F-O-E. Is that right? Hang on, let me just double check that. So that is right. So we're going to dismiss that. One in front of the other. Yep, we'll go with that. No. Right. Okay, so okay. Oh, there we go. Right, I feel myself already tiring a little bit, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I am going to do the next chapter because I've got this far. Let me just drag chapter 27. So I have got 6 chapters to do, and I wanted to do 3 a day. So actually, I'm now getting ahead, and if I'm honest, I will probably get this signed off, and then maybe do some more offline tonight. Hang on, let me just drag that down there. Maybe drag that up there a little bit. Get rid of that. Zoom in on that. Right, okay, I'm just going to quickly, because I think I heard something happening on here. No, I didn't. Okay, ignore me. Right, back to this view then. Okay, this is the last bit I will do in this session. I may come back later, probably won't. Mind you, it's only 6:20 now. I do fancy getting this signed off tomorrow though, so I do think that'd be a good idea. Right, chapter 28. So we just had an actiony chapter. Now we need a talky chapter, and then finally the shit hits the fan in the last 4 chapters. Seywood woke up in a bed. It took a moment for her to orient herself as she looked around her. This was a bedroom in the main part of the house rather than the east wing. She sighed, then noticed someone was sitting in a chair at the foot of her bed. It was Molly, who broke into a smile when she saw Seywood's eyes open. "You okay?" Molly asked. Seywood slumped back, her forehead creasing into a frown. "I don't know. Why are you here?" "Can I sit on the bed?" asked Molly. Seywood grunted, which Molly took to be assent. She sat down at the far end. Seywood looked away, ashamed. "I'm surprised you even want to talk to me." "I'm surprised you even..." "Yeah, that's right. You even want to talk to me." Molly shook her head. "I saw your pain, Seywood. Your horror and loss. I had to live through it to try and prise the stone from your fingers. It was overwhelming." Seywood closed her eyes. "I'm sorry I had to see that." Molly leaned closer. "Seywood, I didn't realise you were so miserable. I knew that losing Rebecca hurt you, but I didn't know about the rest of it. I'm worried about you. I didn't know you were so sad inside." Seywood raised her head and looked over to Molly. "What did you see?" she asked cautiously. "Your parents. You lost them when you were young." Seywood shook her head and closed her eyes. "I don't want to talk about them." "But have you ever talked to anyone about them? Even Rebecca?" The name echoed through Seywood's head like a wayward gunshot. She took a shuddering breath and tried to contain the emotions. "I never talked to anyone about my parents. Never." Molly had been inching closer to Seywood and carefully took her hand. "I want you to tell me." Seywood opened her eyes. "I can't." A single tear ran down her cheek. Molly squeezed her hand gently. "Please, if I understand, maybe I can help." "There's nothing you can do," muttered Seywood. Molly leaned in and kissed her forehead gently. "I can listen." Oh. Saywood took a deep breath and relented. She had no intention of telling Molly the whole story, but realised that getting something off her chest might be therapeutic. She settled back down into the deep pillows and took her hand away from Molly. Closed her eyes. She lay like that for a few seconds before she started to speak. I never really knew them, she said slowly. I was 5 when they sent me away. The words were jittery, uneven, a few reluctant syllables at a time. They stayed in Ghana and I came here to live with my great-aunt Sylvia. Sylvia never resented having me, but she never showed me any affection either. My parents used to tell me they loved me all the time and hug me and make me feel special. Great Aunt Sylvia put a roof over my head and food on my table and food on the table in front of me, but I never felt loved. Sylvia put her hands over her eyes. Speaking was slightly easier now, and she sounded less stilted. One day she called me into the living room. Maybe a year after I arrived, she told me that she'd been given some bad news. My parents had died in a car accident. She said she was sorry, but that she would look after me. And did she? Saywood gave a sad smile. I don't think it was deliberate, but Sylvia always made me feel like I was. Let me just scroll up because the printing quality. I need new toner. I don't think it was deliberate, but Sylvia always made me feel that I was in her way, that there were other things she would rather be doing. I lived in that atmosphere from age 5 until I moved out to go to university at 18. That was a year and a half ago now. Until I met Bex, I always felt I was a burden on the people around me. I hated living with my great aunt, and ending up resenting my parents for leaving with her. She gave a weak smile. Selfish, huh? Then you met Rebecca. I always remember the moment I saw her. I was at the bar and I felt my heart almost stopped. She was so beautiful. I tried to buy her a drink, but she said no. We had friends in common, so we ran into each other quite regularly. At first she was distant with me, but we eventually started getting on as friends and then more. I knew I was the first gay relationship that she'd ever had, but it just felt right. The tears started flowing again, and then I found out that she never loved me at all, that I'd somehow influenced her using an ability I had no idea that I had. She loved me because I wanted her to, not because she had any real feelings for me. Molly inched closer and tried to hold her hand, but Saywood snatched it away with a scowl. I'm so sorry, Molly said gently. I'm sorry about your parents. I'm sorry about Rebecca. But when I look at you, I see someone who is strong and caring despite all the things she's faced. I'm stuck in a crazy place now that I don't understand, and if it were not for you and Edward, I'd have gone crazy. I need you, Saywood. She leaned forward and smiled forlornly. I need you to help keep me sane. Molly grabbed Saywood's hand again, and this time she did not resist. Thank you, whispered Saywood, squeezing Molly's hand. I saw so much darkness eating you up yesterday, said Molly quietly. I want to help you, so let's make a deal. From now on, you tell me what makes you sad, and I'll do the same. Saywood nodded. Okay then. She considered lowering her mental barriers, but stopped herself. What makes you sad? She whispered. Molly closed her eyes. Losing the one person I've ever fallen in love with. He was a lovely boy, bullied by his father, but somehow managed to stay kind when it had been so easy for him to pass that spitefulness on to someone else. It was Edward's older brother, and his name was Alfie. Now I do need to add a little bit here. Molly closed her eyes and started talking about how she'd met Alfie, how they'd become closer, how they'd fallen completely for each other. Even when everyone Alfie knew had teased him about Molly always wearing the same dress, how they'd married in secret the day before he went to war, and how she felt that what Max Sos had done to her was some kind of divine retribution for that perceived. For the... of deceiving both of their parents. It's not as good logic, but it makes sense. They married and slept with everyone, how she felt that what Max Sos had done to her was some kind of divine retribution for the sin of deceiving both of their parents. When Molly had said everything she needed to say, Saywood talked more about Rebecca. Molly climbed in onto the bed and lay on the empty half beside her. Once they both finished speaking, they lay in silence till they both fell asleep. I hasten to add there is not ever any romantic feelings between these two. They are just friends. In fact, Saywood does something quite selfish at the end of the book, but then Sayward is ultimately a loner. So, but anyway, some hours later, perhaps the next morning, so was not quite sure how much time had passed. She woke again. Molly was no longer there because she could see a figure in the shadows at the end of the bed. He was sitting in a wheelchair, and when their eyes met, he rolled himself slightly forwards. "How are you, my dear?" asked Sir Teddy gently. Sayward shook her head, but did not try to sit up. She blinked, and as she did so, the image of Rebecca entered her mind. Sir Teddy's eyes widened as strong feelings of loss were forced into him. He blinked. "I'm so sorry about everything that happened to you," he said gently. "I know the Institute is desperate for your help, but you are not in the correct frame of mind to assist them now. I have told them they must wait." Sayward shook her head. "No, without my help, Cecil will continue what he's been doing." Sayward gave a tiny nod. "But not forever, Sayward. They have explained to me that they can always find him now, thanks to a skill possessed by young Miss Myerscough and the fact that they own something that belonged to him. They will give you time to recover both physically and emotionally, and then deal with him when you are ready." Sayward shook her head. "But he could be anywhere by then. He owns properties all over the world. At least when he's in this country, he's on home turf." "The Institute has wings that enfold the globe," said Sir Teddy. "Wherever he is, they will find him." Sayward sat up in the bed. "But in the meantime, he's free to continue hurting people." Sir Teddy pushed his chair forward. "It's better they succeed on their first attempt. If they fail and have to try again, he will be ready for them the second time. Many more people may die. They do not believe they can defeat him without you, so they must wait." "Is there anyone from the Institute here?" asked Sayward. "Meredith Lawson wishes to speak to you." "Geraldine and Jagvir are here too. The others have left, although some of them will be back in the next couple of days." "Why?" "There was a lot of damage in the storm," replied Sir Teddy. "The windows at the front of the house are broken. The east wing is a bit of a mess. That's why you're here. They're going to repair the damage for me." Sayward looked down. "I'm sorry." "Why are you sorry?" "I was the storm," explained Sayward. Sir Teddy nodded. "That's what Molly said." Hang on, I just need to again just change a tiny bit. "That's what Molly said," he whispered gently. "Pay it no mind." "Molly," muttered Sayward herself. "Is Molly all right?" "She's rather worried about you," admitted Sir Teddy. "It was Molly who identified that we needed to remove the Pilato from your grasp to end the storm." Sayward reached a hand to a chest and found that the necklace was missing. She sat bolt upright, her eyes wide. "Where is it?" she demanded. "It's on the bedside table," said Sir Teddy, indicating to her right. "I wouldn't touch it for now, though." Sayward nodded. "Mrs. Lawson would like to talk to you. Are you ready for that?" "Do I have a choice?" Sir Teddy glared at her. "Of course you do. You are in my home. You will not be forced to do anything you do not wish to under my roof." Sayward shook her head. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'll see her now." Sir Teddy smiled and moved his chair next to the bed and took her hand. He gave the back of it a gentle kiss, which surprised Sayward somewhat. "Just remember, there are always people in place to help you," he said gently. "All you have to do is let it be known that you need help." He tapped the side of her head gently. "In any way that you can." He smiled. "Remember these words, and the actions that accompany them." He kissed the back of her hand again, then, looking slightly embarrassed, backed away in his wheelchair. He withdrew a mobile phone from his suit jacket, and made a call. "Yes," he said. There was a pause. "She will see you now. I will be remaining with her." Less than 2 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. "Enter," called Sir Teddy. The door opened, and Mr. Harris led Meredith Lawson into the room, followed by Geraldine and Jagvir. "How are you feeling?" asked Meredith once Harris had closed the door. "Like I've been kicked in the head." "I was very sorry to hear about your friend Rebecca." "Friend?" said Sayward forcefully. "Friend? She wasn't just my friend, she was my life." Meredith nodded. "I wasn't trying to downplay your loss, forgive me. As you know, I also lost my mother to Max Sosi. We need to stop him, and we need you to stand a chance of accomplishing that. You need to be ready, and you are not." Sayward looked as though she was on the edge of tears, but managed to retain her composure. "I'm not ready, but I must be. He killed my reason for waking up in the morning. I have only ever loved one person in my life, Mrs. Lawson, and he took her away. From what you told me, he's been hurting people for hundreds and hundreds of years, and now, because you say I'm not ready, he will be free to continue." Meredith pulled up a chair and sat down in front of her. "It's not just about being ready to take him on. It's about being ready to work as part of a team. What you did out there yesterday just proved that you are reckless, indisciplined and dangerous. If you do your own thing on the day, Sayward, if we are not a cohesive unit, he will destroy us. Do you understand?" Sir Teddy looked as though he was about to say something, but Meredith glared at him forcefully. He closed his mouth, but continued to watch intently. We have a plan that you are a vital part of. But if you deviate from what we ask you to do, it will fail. I don't believe you're ready to take instruction to succeed. You must do exactly as you are told. I know you think our plan to trap Sosie in one of his own pictures is a mistake, but that is what we have decided to do. Down the line, we may be able to learn his secrets, what all of his abilities are, and how he's lived so long. I know you think he should die, but that is revenge and not logic talking. If you merely trap him, one day he will escape, snapped Sayward. He won't, said Meredith gently. You don't know anything of what we do or how it works. Do you think we're stupid enough to try and cage a wild tiger only to risk it escaping? You are vital for the success of our operation, but you have to do as you are told. If you don't convince me you will do so, then we cannot continue. But alive he could hurt more people, said Sayward fiercely. Yes, said Meredith, snapped Meredith back. He could, and that will be down to you. As Teddy rolled forwards to intercede, but he was beaten to it by Jagvir, who glared and shook his head at Meredith, then knelt as his face was only a couple of feet from Sayward's. Your life has been upended in the last month, said Jagvir gently. You learned that you have abilities. You learned about us. You found out things that should stay in the realm of fairy tales. You found out the things that should stay in the realm of fairy tales are true. It is a lot to take in, but you are dangerous, said Geraldine. Not out of an intent to me, but because you are so powerful and so new to all of this. You could quite easily have killed somebody yesterday. Meredith looked at both of them. I brought Geraldine and Jagvir here today because they represent the two views out there amongst our members. Some have deselected themselves from the Sosie operation because of what you did yesterday. You terrified a lot of good people who came into this with the right intentions. Jagvir here believes that by appealing to your better nature I can win you round but to doing things our way. Geraldine, however, thinks that you will never conform. Sayward shot her a poisonous look, but Geraldine held her gaze. It's nothing personal, Sayward. I just don't want anybody to die unnecessarily. I don't think you're a bad person, but I do think you're too impulsive, too badly hurt by recent events. An image of Rebecca flashed across Sayward's mind, accompanied by an overwhelming sensation of loss. Everyone in the room winced slightly. Sayward shook her head, apologised, and threw up a wall around her mind. It took her a couple of seconds. Right, have I already established in this chapter that there is a wall there? I'm sorry, but I think I might have to just have a look at that. Yeah, I thought so. So that needs to go, because that's basically saying they're already up. Okay, that's fine. An image of Rebecca. Let's just go back to the wall. An image of Rebecca flashed across Sayward's mind, accompanied by an overwhelming sensation of loss. Everyone else in the room winced slightly. Sayward shook her head, apologised, and threw up a wall around her mind. It took her a couple of seconds. Meredith smiled. That's very impressive. Think of what you could do when properly trained. I don't want to be properly trained, snapped Sayward. I want to help kill Max Sosie, then throw up a barrel around my wine so bloody thick I'll never be able to use this thing again. Meredith looked straight at her. We are not going to kill him. It's a shit plan, muttered Sayward. Meredith stood up. I'm sorry, we're wasting our time here. She turned to leave, but Jagvir reached behind him and took her arm, without taking his eyes off Sayward. We are not killers, said Jagvir softly. I understand that the desire for revenge is coursing through you, but if we kill him, we are as bad as him. Sayward shook her head. Nobody is as bad as him. Jagvir nodded sympathetically. Sayward, we need to do this now. We know where he is, and we have people in place, but we cannot succeed without your help. If we have to delay things, we will. But people will be hurt as a result. Sosie will hurt them. And that's on me. Jagvir shook his head. It's on all of us, Sayward, for failing to persuade you to help us, for not giving you enough information to make you realise that trapping him, not killing him, is the best option. Sayward wiped wet eyes with the back of her hand. I don't understand why. I know you don't, said Jagvir gently, But do you trust me? Saywood looked away. I don't trust them. She thrust her chin out in the direction of Meredith and Geraldine. Jagvir smiled. You don't have to trust them, just me. I know what happened to Rebecca was terrible. I only met her a few times, but she was an incredible young woman. Would she want you to sink to his level? Or would you want you to help us do the right thing and stop him from hurting anyone else? Saywood glared at him before emotions finally gave in and she burst into floods of tears. Her defences collapsed again and everyone felt her despair. Although his natural inclination was to move away to escape from the intensity of Saywood's pain, instead Jagvir hugged her, patting her back reassuringly. There was silence for a few minutes. He's a nice bloke, isn't he, that Jagvir? She'd want me to do the right thing, said Saywood in a small voice. I think she would too. So please, help us to do it, whispered Jagvir into her ear. He leaned back and took her hand. Please. Saywood looked around at the people by her bedside, her eyes settling on Jagvir. She finally nodded. OK. She looked up into his kind eyes. But promise me he won't ever escape. Meredith stepped forward and smiled. I can promise you that. She winced as another thought pushed into her mind. Perhaps you ought to rebuild your wall now, Miss Amapofo. I can see that you're telling us the truth, not just what we want to hear, but that truth is buried in a lot of stray thoughts and feelings. She stepped back and smiled. Thank you. We'll give you another couple of days to rest. Jagvir stood up and stepped back. As he walked past Meredith, he reached out and squeezed her shoulder. Nodded to him with a As he walked past Meredith, she reached out and squeezed his shoulder, nodded to him with a smile, and then sat down on the end of the bed. I do understand that you feel a need for vengeance, Saywood. Truly. He took my mother from me. Sir Teddy and I believe that it was my mother that freed him. There may be many other people that we can set free. Isabel discovered both how to imprison people in the canvas and how to release them. Maybe helping the people restored could be part of your role once this is over. I don't want a role, said Saywood impatiently. I don't know how many times I have to say it. Meredith nodded. OK, I understand. I've asked Geraldine Jagvir to stay here with you for a couple of days to help you with anything you need to learn. Saywood looked at Teddy. He smiled. You are very brave, Saywood, he said. She shook her head. I'm being used, she said gradually. We all know it. Meredith took her hand. But not cynically, Saywood. And I promise you this, once it is done, we will help you however we can, even if it's simply by leaving you alone. Forever? Meredith inclined her head. If that's really what you want. Saywood nodded. It's what I want, she said firmly. Max Sosey's stately home in the Highlands stood centrally within large and rugged grounds. The gardens were uneven, with plenty of rocks littering the land. I just need to reword. There's a sentence that I like what it puts across, but I don't like the way it's constructed. That's better. Max Sosey's stately home in the Highlands of Scotland stood centrally within large and rugged grounds. The gardens were uneven, with plenty of rocks littering the landscape, fist-sized stones, huge boulders buried deep into the soil, and everything in between. There we go. The building itself was in a valley. That needs to be a new paragraph. The building itself was in a valley, and there was The building itself was in a valley. There was a small lock on its eastern side, and the thin road wound down the rocky hill, leading to the flatter ground below. There were plenty of spaces to hide in Max Sosey's Highland property, a convenience that several people were currently taking advantage of. One of those two people were currently taking advantage of. One of those was Ailie Munro. She was wearing a thick coat and a pair of binoculars were hanging around her neck. Wisps of blonde hair peeked from beneath a black woolen hat with a white bobble, and she had pushed her glasses up onto her forehead to inspect the property from the relative safety of one of the vast grass mounds. She was lying flat on the ground facing a slope that meandered down towards the house. On the moist grass beside her lay a mobile phone. Although it was useless up here, Ailie had not been able to get a signal since she had arrived. Sosey was at home and had been for a few days. It was Ailie's task today to monitor the property and ensure that, should he leave, people were notified. The operation to deal with him had been called off and then reinstated several times over the last few days, but the communication they received earlier suggested that it was finally and definitively back on. Ailey heard a slight rustle behind her and looked over her shoulder to see Isabel lowering herself to her knees and approaching her. Ailey nodded her with a wave and raised the binoculars again. She could see the main hall through the front windows and even a figure strutting around in the room. It could only be Max Sosi. The last time he'd arrived here 3 days ago, he'd been by himself. The time before that, he'd brought a girl with him, someone in her late teens by the look of her. There had been some screaming, but eventually silence. It had been so hard not to interfere, and Ailey had to keep telling herself that it was for the greater good. Isabel crawled up beside her. "Anything worth reporting?" she asked. "Quite as a grave," was Ailey's response, although she immediately wished that she had chosen different words. "Do we have a date?" "Meredith Lawson is flying Sayward up tomorrow," replied Isabel. "When they arrive, everyone is in place. It should happen the day after, provided that nothing changes here." Ailey flashed binoculars to her face, raised the binoculars to her face again, and glanced across to the house. It was a large 2-storey home rendered in white. The garden immediately before it dropped sharply away, and there was a grand stone staircase about 10 metres before the front door that enabled visitors to navigate the slope safely. There was one, and I have got pictures, I think, because I do. I always base the descriptions on an actual property. And I think no. Oh wow! Oh god! I actually designed the suite from the hotel. It was a real place as well. I thought. Crossley model. So this is Max Sosi's car from the 1900s. That's what his car looks like. Just so you can see. It's a gorgeous old Crossley Model 15. But I'm sure I have. I'm sure. So that's Elvington Manor. That's the place. Oh, that's a bad picture. I thought. That's really terrible. I thought I actually had. Oh, ignore me. I thought I had pictures of this place. In fact, I definitely did. I just can't remember what I've done with them. Anyway, ignore me. Sorry. There's one light on an upstairs window and several lights on downstairs. Isabel smiled as she lay down next to Ailey. "May I?" she asked. Ailey moved the binoculars from around her neck and handed them to Isabel, put them down on the grass next to her and stared across at Ailey. "If you're not going to use them, I'll have them back if you... If you're not going to use them, I'll have them back if you don't mind," Ailey said in a soft Edinburgh accent. Actually, no, let's not have her Edinburgh. They're in the Highlands. Let's actually have her having a Highlands accent. Isabel continued to stare at her, and her look now seemed somewhat apologetic. "What's wrong?" asked Ailey. Isabel gave her a smile and did not reach her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Sorry for what?" Isabel closed her eyes for a moment, and Ailey felt like a wrecking ball and suddenly been taken to her mental defences. Her eyes widened as she felt them crumbling away from an attack that could only be coming from the woman opposite her. She tried to raise her hands to push Isabel away, but found that her arms were locked into place. Apart from breathing, she could not move at all. "What?" she struggled to say. Isabel looked at her directly. "That man, monster, creature, in there, however you want to describe him, is the most ancient, powerful being that we've ever encountered. His knowledge and experience are enormously valuable. Why trap him in a painting? What does that achieve? We may not have the courage to release him for decades, centuries even." A strange look crossed Isabel's face. "What an absolute waste that would be," she said softly. Despite the cold, Ailey could feel sweat breaking out on her forehead. What are you doing? She managed to say through her clenched teeth. I'm not blocking my thoughts. He can sense me. The thought terrified her, and her desperation flew out in every direction, assaulting Isabel's senses. Isabel nodded. He can. She picked up the binoculars and looked down the hill. She could no longer see Sosie through the hall window, and moments later the front door opened. Sosie emerged in a raincoat carrying his cane. He scanned the horizon, and his eyes seemed to fix on the binoculars, although there was no way he could see them. Isabel grabbed Ailey's face, digging her fingers roughly into her mouth and cheeks, and closed her eyes. Ailey seemed to mentally fold in on herself, and the memories of the last few minutes faded from her mind as she lay on the ground unconscious. Once she was finished, Isabel backed away slowly, down the slope on the opposite side of the mound. She knew that Sosie would be heading this way, but that he was far away enough for sound not to carry in the wind for a few moments more. Isabel ran down the rest of the slope and dashed across the path that led up and out of the valley, scrambling up a steep and stony incline so that she was about a third of the way along the road. From there, she hid behind a large boulder at the side. She could see Sosie and the mound that held Ailey's inert form. Sosie walked up to Ailey, arriving at her side a moment after she returned to consciousness. Ailey immediately tried to build a mental barrier, but as soon as she started to generate it, she received a boot in her face. She screamed, and Sosie knelt. He grabbed her by the back of her, tore off her hat, and pulled at her hair, staring into her now bloodied face. What are you doing here, witch? He whispered, just loud enough for her to hear above the wind. Ailey trembled and tried to rebuild her mental barriers, but Sosie was too quick. He slapped her face and twisted her hair until she screamed. She could feel him burrowing into her mind and rifling through her knowledge of what was going to happen in the next couple of days. His face twisted in anger as he read the plans for the fate that the Institute had for him, and leapt to his feet. He pulled Ailey upright by her hair and started to march her down the slope towards the staircase leading to his front door. Sosie could see tears in her eyes as she realised what was about to happen to her. He let go of her hair and raised the cane as a threat. Keep walking, he said with a snarl. Then he smiled. And the fate you've convinced yourself awaits you is but the tip of the iceberg, young lady. I will make you pay 100-fold for what your institute is planning. He raised the silver end of the cane to her face, and she shuddered, anticipating pain, but he merely tapped the side of her head gently, then stopped. But first, you are going to tell me in detail what they intend for me. Yeah, he led her towards the stone steps and dragged her up them. Isabel watched him take her into the house and through the binoculars, her face impassive. The door slammed shut, and Isabel dropped the binoculars, drew a grim look on her face and a tear in the corner of her eye. Betraying Ailey was horrible, especially knowing what Sosie would certainly do to her, but it was necessary. Isabel turned and faced away from the house, walking quickly along the road as it snaked up the side of the hill. So Isabel has betrayed Ailey, that we've never met before, so haven't got emotionally attached to, thankfully. I don't think there's another character it could have been, because I need Geraldine to be in other places. Right, so 5 chapters left after this. Let me just export to Grammarly, Word. And we'll drag it into Grammarly. Grammarly. I don't know why I said that. Because I'm insane. I'm as insane as Max Sosie. I'm not. Right, so general, close that, and do that, and do that. And what's the score this is giving me to start off with? 87, that'll do. Molly benching over close to 7, took a hand. Okay. Pictures. Yeah, actually that doesn't need to be there, that word. Right then. Okay, so There we go. So that's chapter 28 signed off. I've only got 5 to go, and I've got 2 days to do it. Let me just drag it into the correct folder. So the remaining chapters are called The Calm, The Storm, Help, Burn, and Those Who Remain. So The Calm, that's basically everybody arriving in Scotland, I think. Oh, that's quite a short one, actually. It's only 7 pages long. The Storm, 13 pages. That's a decent length one. Help, 11. And Burn, 10. And then the final chapter, which could be an epilogue, actually. I might have to... Yeah, that's quite a long one as well. I don't think I'm going to do any more today. I might read some through, but I'm not going to do any more sign-offs today, I don't think. But there we go. That'll do me. That's a good day's work. Oh, actually, I could record the podcast now. Couldn't I get that done as well? Let's get the pod done. Let me find the software. So it is Friday the 21st of March. Hello, today is Friday the 21st of March, and you are listening to the Diary of a Wannabe... Oh, cock, I forgot to say the year. Hello, today is Friday the 21st of March 2025, and you are listening to the Diary of a Wannabe Writer. And thankfully, I've had a productive day today. So yesterday I did nothing when I should have done quite a lot. And the 2 days before, and the day before that, I kind of planned to do nothing and even got slightly ahead. But to get back on track today, I would have had to sign off 5 chapters. And I've actually done that. I've done better than that. I've done 6, which is brilliant. So that just literally leaves me with 5 chapters of still life to sign off over the next 2 days. It is quite interesting because, as I say, I've been very close to my other work, Empress of the Trees, up until this point. Also, I noticed on the podcast I say a lot in this. So I am going to try and speak a little bit more slowly, think about what I'm going to say in advance, and hopefully say a little bit less. So yes, I woke up this morning thinking hopefully that I would manage to do a live stream relatively early. I did manage to do that. So I think I started at about 8:30. It might even have been slightly before that, but I started at a reasonable time and managed to get 3 chapters completely signed off. These were the ones that I had done some prep. So even on the days where I say I'm doing nothing, I did actually read them yesterday, even if I didn't properly sign them off. So yes, I managed to sign off 3 more chapters in my morning session, which I'm trying to remember what they were. Look, I'm not saying because I'm consciously thinking about it. So I managed to get 23, 24 and 25 signed off, which basically had me where I needed to be. Oh no, it didn't have me where I needed to be because I needed to do 26 and 27 as well. So what I did on my initial live stream, the first one I did, was I read them, made some edits, but I didn't print them out. I haven't done a huge amount today beyond that because I'm still not sleeping very well. And also I've been watching the news with interest because I work at Heathrow. I'm not due to work until Monday, but it's very, very likely that the power outage and the fact the majority of flights were cancelled today, it is very likely that is going to have some impact on what I do at work on Monday. Exactly what, couldn't tell you, but hey, I'll turn up on Monday and find out. Anyway. So on this first live stream, as well as signing off those chapters, I also read through chapters 26 and 27. for the first time this draft, and once again realised that there was very little that actually needed doing to them, which was very reassuring. As I say, then I did very little this afternoon, and my plan was always to come on and do a second session where I got those 2 chapters signed off. And in fact, just before I came on, I read chapter 28 as well. Did the kind of the first read through of it. Not the first read through, this is the 5th draft, at least the 7th or 8th read through, but kind of decided that one was ready to sign off as well. And then I came onto my live stream. Well, it is now 6:56, so I must have started the live stream at about 5:20, so 1 hour 36 minutes ago, and in that time I've managed to get chapter 26 signed off, chapter 27 signed off. Chapter 27 is kind of a bit of a dramatic chapter because, let me call that back up, a bit of a dramatic chapter because it's effectively the dry run for stopping Sosie, and unfortunately dear Saywood follows one person's instructions, which is basically not to make it easy for the Institute, but loses control of the situation because she's so emotional and powerful and genuinely creates a situation where she has to be stopped. And it ain't good because that then puts a bit of a... It kind of then makes the higher ups in the Institute wonder if it's actually wise to send her up to Scotland where they're going to confront Sosie in this state. It is a chapter that I enjoyed writing, and I did enjoy reading it back. And kind of you can see, I mean, I do sometimes see bits of this in terms of a movie, and I can absolutely see that sequence, how to be directed. Even the fact that when Lady Khalida Desai walks in, she's going to be in slow motion, and all the chaos that's surrounding her doesn't affect her. And then, then I did chapter 28, which is effectively the bridge chapter. It's the one where they basically say to her, look, you have to follow our plan. You don't like it, but you have to follow it, because if you don't, a lot of people are going to die. We cannot afford you to go and do your own thing. You have to work as part of a team. And actually, it's Jagvir who convinced, and Jagvir was very much meant to be just background Indian shopkeeper when I first introduced the character. And I really like his empathy. He seems to understand Saywood a lot better than Geraldine or the other characters, and I really like him, and I do have plans for books beyond this. This was originally meant to be a one-off, but I do have plans for a couple of stories beyond this, and Jagvir as a character, he's basically my Marianne character from Empress of the Trees, designed to be a background character, and then kind of put their head above the parapet and said, no, do more with me, I'm interesting. And he really is, and I really like him. So Jagvir will be used. And I haven't decided, I need to decide a bit more about his background. I think I'm going to say he's a Sikh, so I probably will need to actually add that at some point. I haven't actually mentioned that he's wearing a turban, so that might be one little thing I do have to add. And I suspect his full name is Jagvir Singh in that case. But anyway, great character, and he's the one who seems to have put Saywood on the right path, but has he really? Well, at some point tomorrow I will try and sign off the last 5 chapters. So if you join me, either I'll tell you how it goes on the podcast, or you can join me on an actual live stream as well. That's it for the Diary of a Wannabe Writer today. I will be back tomorrow, hopefully with a bit of a better idea of what's happening at Heathrow, and hopefully with this draft signed off. Join me then. Thank you very much. There we go, and that's that recorded. Let me just chuck the opening and closing music on. No, wrong bit. So opening music and end music. Let me just maximize that. Then that needs to go there. Draggity. Oh, you can go over there. You can go there, but I just need to listen to you, make sure that that's about the right time. So let's just hang on. I just want to make sure that it works. Bear with me. Hello, today is Friday the 21st of March. And yes, I do use the same theme tune for the podcast and the live stream. The reason is it's the live stream of a Wannabe Writer and the Diary of a Wannabe Writer. So there's a bit of deliberate branding sort of continuity going on there. Isn't that exciting? No. No, you don't care. That's fair enough. I don't think anybody's... I can't tell if anybody's watching. Certainly nobody's putting stuff in the chat room. Or if they are, the chat room's not working, which is also possible because... Yeah, but we shall see. Right, let me just... Oh, chuck the... check the end of music's in the right place. Then I'll get it saved, uploaded. Then I shall leave you alone to do your own thing. Let's have a look. Here's what's happening at Heathrow, and hopefully with this draft signed off. Join me then. Thank you very much. You have been listening to the Diary of a Wannabe Writer. Yep, you have. So file, export as MP3. The file name will be today's date, so 210325. Save. Okay. Right, that's done. You don't need to watch me schedule it on my phone, which is what I'm going to do now. But thank you so much for people who've watched on both of the sessions that I've done today. I do feel like I've been productive, and I don't feel quite so bad about having done literally nothing yesterday. So those of you who are watching, thank you very much. Those of you who watched and interacted during my earlier session, also thank you very much. I will be back probably 8 o'clock, 8:30 UK time tomorrow morning to do the next session, which I'll probably do 2 sessions today to get this thing signed off. Anyway, thanks for watching. That's me done. Take care. Bye-bye.